My title is different from the slide. When I was invited to give this talk, I'm rather surprised there's many people. I thought, an association of museums would get 20 people. But there's a lot more, and there's some who are not into museums. But I'd like to think that today I just wanted to share. It's not my normal lecture things. I want to talk a little bit about my experience with museums and to talk about how students actually think museums are boring places to visit. Every year I send my students to museums because I don't want to teach too much. So they have to go and look at things and tell me what they saw. And in the past 10 years, actually, I've seen that the reactions are different. In the beginning, and most of the time, because they're college students, many of the students come back and actually say that they always start with, this was a drag, but because it was required, I had to go. I was prepared to be bored. And oftentimes, maybe because they want a better grade, they say, it was a nice experience. But I'd like to think that the big difference is really because when you're in college, you have something to, you have a reference point. So you understand the things that you see. It's very different when you are herded in as a child. And when I was thinking about this today, I actually remember that I actually have no childhood experience of a museum. Or if I have, it must have been so forgettable, I don't remember anything. So my going to museums came later, came when I was in college already. And again, maybe I think one of the ways in which we can make people go to museums is to bring them when they are small. And if you've been to museums abroad, that's what you usually see. Little children being brought to the museums, their teachers telling them about paintings. They're walking around holding treasure. They have activities. They copy paintings. They look for things. So when they go out, they actually have a pleasant experience of what the museum is. But the many years that I've been watching people like, say, the National Museum, the kids are brought in, they line up, and then the teachers tell you, do not talk, do not touch the paintings, don't make noise, do not breathe. And they line up and you cannot stay long. So one child wants to look at something closely and the teachers listen because why are they rushing? Because the National Museum is part of the tour from somebody, a school from out of town. They have to finish in 30 minutes because they have to be in the TV studio at 12 o'clock to watch Itulaga. And then the afternoon is spent in Mega Mall. So the highlight is really to end in the morning. The museum was just an inconvenient part of the tour. So I want to talk about boredom and I want to talk about museums. I also want to talk about how actually museum people should go back to what we originally thought they were. The muses, actually, when I was talking about this with my friend, I said, I'm going to talk about the muses and how museum came from muse. And his idea of muse was somebody in a band, or somebody in school, the pretty girl of school who's the mutya or the muse of the school. So I had to explain to him in the muses were 9 goddesses that were given certain things. So there's a muse for music, a muse for poetry, a muse for history, and so they hold different kinds of things. So you cannot see it from the back, but there are actually 9 muses, and you can look this up. It will tell you what things they hold that will let you know which particular muse we are talking about. I also looked at dictionary, what a muse is. And aside from the pretty girl in school who's the muse, the muse means also to think, to reflect, to meditate in silence, which is why museums, they don't want us to make noise. To comment thoughtfully, which which we normally do not do, especially on the internet. The nice thing about Muse is also, it is to loiter or to waste time. And when we go to a museum, we loiter and we waste time. And the word actually comes from an ancient word that talks about standing with your nose up, like a dog, sniffing like a dog, which they say is the word muzzle, which is what you use to contain a dog's mouth, is actually comes from muse. So when we think of the muses, we think of a temple that was dedicated to these goddesses that inspired poetry and art and music. And that's why in many old museums, like the British Museum, they really look like Greek temples. The Philippine National Museum, when you look at it, it has this, it has columns, it has a pediment. And so when you look at it, they're making us go back to what museums were in the past, which was a temple to the muses. So when you look at it, inside you have these Greek-looking things, which is supposed to remind us of it. What most people do not look at, which I find very amusing, is when you look up the pediment. Sorry, this is an old picture. It wasn't even National Museum yet. It was Executive House. But when you look at it, you see Mercury, you see Greek gods there, and then in the middle, you see Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, who are made up like Greek goddesses. You know? So those women that placed in the Greek pediment. So this is the whole thing about making the museum part of us. It's a foreign concept, but the point there also is that museums are there because they're supposed to help us to understand the things that they have. Museums are collections of collections. And if you've ever tried collecting anything, it can be stamps, it can be coins, it can be phone cards, porn magazines. You can collect all sorts of things, you get them, and when you put them together, there is a way in which you put things together. You arrange them in a certain way, and that is actually what a museum does. So it collects, it classifies, it arranges. And later on, when they start to bring people into the museum, they have to tell a story. So today, when you go around, maybe after the talk, look at this museum and see if you can find a story. I've been walking around before. I couldn't find the story. But maybe we will find it later. The Museum of Alexandria was also different. It was a place for study. It was a place where they had texts. And the interesting thing is that the ancient Greek museum did not have objects. So it was a place where people met. It was like a school. If there was anything they kept, it was texts. So I'd like to think that when we talk of museums and we remember the past, we just think of a museum as a space where people wanted to get inspired to do greater things, or just to be inspired, just to forget the everyday. And I think that is what museums give us. In this closed, air-conditioned, quiet space, we have time to think of other things. And that is what it brings us. So, from museum, the old one, to the museum, I was looking at pictures, and as I told you again, you can collect all sorts of things. Early days, people collected things, and they put them together in some particular way. And what little museums were actually little cabinets. And in Europe, they were called cabinets of curiosities. So you put all sorts of strange things in the museum, in your little cabinet, and you arrange it nicely, arrange it in a particular order, then it became this. Some museums went beyond cabinets. Some collections went beyond cabinets, and so they started to have it on the walls, on shelves, and bigger things. And so these, from little collections in little cabinets, it grew into buildings. It grew into big spaces. So when you see it, something as simple as a collection of shelves, you can just put them in a box, or you can arrange them. And the way in which you arrange it is what the museum actually does.